morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody from all around the world. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here with our entire community, with so many people from around the world tuning in, with our customers, our prospects. Thank you for investing the time today. I know it's always sort of very precious, but hopefully this is a super useful day for you. You learn something and you're able to sort of really sort of connect with each other, both fellow customers and sort of colleagues from other companies, with stackers who hopefully can help you. So we really want to make sure it's a productive day. So really, I thought I'd start today with talking about a couple sort of items. I wanted to start with a very macro view that sort of affects all of us as sort of humans, so to speak, and then go down to sort of specifically as technology leaders, what are the trends that we're actually experiencing? And we know a bit about this, considering we have 100 million people going through our websites, so I thought I'd share some of those. And then ultimately, I wanted to share what we at Stack Overflow can do to help you, especially considering all the challenges that you're sort of facing as technology leaders and people. All right, so I wanted to start with what I thought was a fairly staggering statistic. So if you think about where we are with the next generation coming online, so to speak, there are approximately 2 billion learners in the secondary and post-secondary education space that are coming into sort of the market, so to speak, over the next 20 years. So if you think about that, or maybe even 25 years, if you think about that sort of massive number, what should be staggering to you is the sort of infrastructure that's in place to make sure these folks are great productive members of society and can contribute to the world moving forward in terms of development. And I can tell you with a lot of, based on a lot of research, that the current education system is really not set up to sort of, to really set these folks up for success and to really help them sort of develop as individuals, especially when you think about technology. To compound this, you've got a massive supply-demand imbalance that is about to sort of occur over the next several years. So you've got roles across both technologist roles as well as knowledge worker roles that are really sort of seeing this massive explosion in terms of the skills that are required and the number of people that actually do those jobs. So to the order of about 85 million in the next, call it about 10 years or so. So that's another sort of big pain point that's about upcoming. When you think about an additional issue, the cost of actually getting a computer science degree, I'm a computer engineering undergraduate. I'm sure many of you have sort of learned computer science along the way. If you look at the top 10 schools in the country even, the cost of getting that education is also super, super high. So if you think about, it's somewhere ranges between 38,000 to 50,000, depending on, which school you go to, especially with out-of-state tuition. And so that is also a really sort of troubling statistic, especially when you combine that with the household income of people, and if you just look at the US as an example, that's about $68,000 per year. And all of that creates a really sort of, horrific problem for folks to be able to generate sort of an engine as we sort of think about the world that's moving towards technology, pretty much, right? So when you think about the last sort of statistic, which is over the past couple of decades, you've got a significant expansion in wealth and income sort of inequality. If you think about the bottom 50% relative to the top 10%, all of that is really, really staggering. The disparity is really telling, right? So all of this is very grim news, and I don't mean to start our conference with grim news, but I have to I'm happy to sort of share that there is hope given all this sort of backdrop in the macro environment. So the biggest sort of point that I mentioned is that education is the grand leveler, right? And this is really sort of important because I'm a sort of a product of this. I grew up in India. I came here to go to college on a scholarship. So for me, having access to education was really, really sort of foundational. I was able to sort of make my way and sort of, build a life. But I think that's super important if you think about, do people really have access, given what I just described to you in terms of the macro statistics? And if you think about the space that now sort of moving to the area that we care about, which is technology, what is also very interesting is that 70% of developers on your teams in our community are learning to code online, right? That's how they learn. And so that's up, by the way, 10 percentage points up from about a year ago. So the way in which people are learning is really shifting, especially when you think about the next generation of technologists, the folks that I was talking about earlier. If you look at the statistics, and all of this, by the way, is from our developer surveys and our Pulse surveys. We survey close to 90,000 people in our community every year. Many of you are in the room, are online. all of this is from that, right? So these are purely sort of very sort of unbiased statistics. Technical documentation, which is online, of course, Stack Overflow, a huge repository of information, and then, of course, videos and blog content, et cetera, are really the primary way in which and how sort of next generation technologists are learning. And they're learning it sort of real time when they actually have an issue, right? And so traditional forms of education, the books, they're all sort of collecting dust, or more traditional sort of classrooms, et cetera, are not on this list. So that sort of is a big sort of wake-up call for us to say that the next generation, we really need to make sure that they're set up for success. So ultimately, when we think about what we're focused on, democratizing education, we really fundamentally believe can really jumpstart economic development and empowerment around the world, right? And I think it's very sort of close to our heart, because as a company and as a business, and as all of you running companies, et cetera, we have a real opportunity and maybe even a responsibility to make a difference on the space, to really drive the world forward when we have sort of the tools at our disposal. And finally, I think the way we can actually do it, especially when you think about education, we all know that education doesn't stop when we graduate from college. If I just stopped learning, or we all stopped learning after college graduation, I think we'd be in really, really deep trouble. Because, especially in our space, continuous learning is super, super important. And so we can actually enable that to happen within our companies and to really unlock the power of organizations, especially when you think about reskilling your folks, because technology is changing so rapidly. How do you make sure that people are constantly learning to be relevant and to be able to contribute to your companies on an ongoing basis? So now let's sort of move to why that is actually so important, right? Because technology is rapidly, rapidly changing and sort of iterating, because even in our annual developer survey, we track the most popular languages every year. We track sort of the most loved languages, and it's fascinating to see the sort of the transition from year over year. 1 year it's Rust, the next year it's Svelte. Longer the days of Perl programming, which I used to do back in 99, 2000. But things have been sort of shifting. Every year there's something that is a new language that's at the forefront, because it's making up for some sort of inefficiency in sort of the previous most loved language, whether it's a memory issue or something that's just more elegant in terms of sort of the efficiency of writing code. So this is important because it implies that you have to be continuously learning as a technologist. So I have the pleasure, and our team here has the pleasure of talking to all of you, customers and developers and technologists, literally on a daily basis. We love engaging with you because we learn so much from you about the challenges that you're facing. And I thought I'd share a little bit over the next few slides with a lot of data. Again, so just sort of, I just wanted to sort of give you that heads up, which is from, again, all our surveys, which are sort of at scale and very material numbers. So the three challenges that we've heard folks sort of describe: number one is hiring, onboarding, retaining, and reskilling your employees to be sort of really, really productive, to drive a lot of things that you're interested in doing within the company, especially given the supply-demand imbalance, the talent gaps that I was mentioning earlier. This is a really, really big challenge. Secondly, it's about executing these big transformations within your company, right? So people are moving to the cloud, to AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, moving out of the data centers, moving to a microservices architecture, enabling a DevOps culture within your organization, unlocking the power of your data through machine learning. You are improving your security posture within your company, given all the sort of cybersecurity threats. So many big transformations that all of you are working on absolutely some amazing sort of game-changing things for your company, both as a company that's more traditional, that's trying to compete, given sort of the competition coming from disruptors, and disruptors trying to really innovate very rapidly to sort of take market share. So on both dimensions, a lot of change. And then finally, we sort of live in a post-pandemic era where distributed work is really sort of the norm, right? We're all sort of, we have 5,000 people signed up to watch this online today, along with the folks in the room, and it just gives you that this is the new age that we live in, and this is not going to change. So this has created a pretty big mess for leaders, technology leaders in companies especially, on how do you manage this sort of hybrid work environment productively. So those are the three challenges. I'm going to deep dive into each one of them with some data to help you. So let's start with hiring and retention, right? So based on our data, what we found out is that 50% of developers said that opportunities to learn was super, super critical for them to stay at their companies or to sort of work for a new company. And that is fundamental, right? We've talked about why continuous learning is so important, and they need to have the ability to have the time and the space to be able to learn new things to keep up with the demands of what's happening in terms of the transformations that your companies are driving. And by the way, as our company, we carve out something called Learn, Share, and Grow Days for our own stackers or our employees to spend time purely to learn and to sort of make sure they have allocated time to develop. Other companies have done this. Obviously, we're not first to the game on this topic, but we really believe it's critical, and it's been really well received. Secondly, 60% of developers have said that flexibility is super important in their current employers and future employers that sort of are trying to sort of why for them. And flexibility means, how they work, when they work, where they work. I remember the days of, debugging code at 3 o'clock in the morning. It just sort of, that was what was necessary. And so putting sort of constraints on how people work, especially when you have so much flexibility and people have tasted how you can actually be productive when you're flexible, I think is very, very important. So 60%, that's a big number. Thirdly, we talk about productivity, and developers and technologists, and very aptly this conference is named Flow State because, getting developers to be distracted or effectively context switching, as we like to say, is really, really a negative feeling within companies. So productivity in all forms, and that could be in the form of even technology stacks, right, which drive productivity, the tools that you're using within your company to make sure that your developers and technologists are actually productive. This particular statistic that you're looking up here is that we actually looked at the people that were in interview processes across our community. I'm talking about, again, 90,000 people. And we noticed that a good chunk of the folks dropped out of the interview process as soon as they found out about the company's tech stack that they're going to be working with, because they said that, I'm just not going to be productive at this company. So it's actually interesting in both leading indicators and lagging indicators how such a powerful, this is such a powerful statistic around productivity. So, in sort of summary in this particular part is that the developer experience and opportunities to learn are things that you can control and we can control to make sure that our people are happy with the work that they're doing at our companies and are really empowered to do to build great things within our companies. Let's go to item number 2, executing big transformations. So if you think about a lot of what's happening on Stack Overflow, developers are learning every day, and we see all this traffic that's sort of consuming content, et cetera, and we really have a sense that what they're learning actually is what is driving the future of technology within companies. So I thought I'd share just a couple of nuggets on this topic. So firstly, of course, the cloud. We've been talking about it for about 10 years. I think cloud questions on Stack Overflow have increased 50% year over year, literally over the past decade. And if you just look at the time during the pandemic, there were about 3 months right after the pandemic hit that we saw an explosion, and it sort of continued, as you can see on the chart, of interest in people asking questions and answering questions on AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and of course, all the associated other sort of cloud topics. And that has sort of pushed us forward pretty much 4 years ahead relative to our sort of more mean statistics that we would have sort of expected, just given sort of pre-pandemic levels. The other thing that we've also noticed is that there's a huge push and sort of huge sort of increase in the interest in learning about containerization. So whether there's technologies like Docker, which have seen significant increases in usage within organizations at scale, Kubernetes, or even native AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud container-relevant services or managed services, there's been a very, very large increase in interest in terms of people learning about this. So it tells you that companies, not just the web-scale companies of yore, but regular companies that are sort of coming online, so to speak, or even born in the cloud companies, obviously are building container-driven applications, which is really sort of exciting. When you think about the data within organizations, we also see a significant interest in companies learning about technologies like TensorFlow or PyTorch and other associated languages that you see here that is also sort of really indicative that people are really gravitating towards unlocking the power of data within their companies. So machine learning is also a huge trend on our websites. And then to a little bit of a religious topic, there's a love-hate relationship with things like blockchain and all the other associated words, Web3 and crypto, irrespective of your belief or your support or your lack of support on the topic. What's actually happening is that people are absolutely learning about it on our website. I think there's close to been an 80% year-over-year increase in the interest in blockchain-related questions and answers on Stack Overflow over the past decade. all right? So that's a very large number. And if you think about the statistic that stood out to me here was the people building blockchain applications within their companies, this is not a hobby, by the way, within their companies is close to about 31%. And by the way, 70% of that 31% are tech companies, which we also looked into. But it's very, very fascinating. And we've done a lot of work around going deeper on this space. So you're welcome to check out our research. So this gives you a sense of what we're seeing on our public website, as well as what's likely happening within your organizations. And then finally, the third item, the macro technology force, is how do we manage in a distributed work environment? And so I'm here to tell you with a lot of confidence that hybrid work is the future. And I think it's sort of a one-way train that has sort of left the station. I've said that before, because once you've actually given it to people and they've actually experienced the efficiencies of not having to commute, to have the tremendous flexibility to work sort of with tremendous amounts of access to information, I think it's just it's very hard to sort of pull back. So if you're a company looking to add people into your organization, and you're trying to hire technologists, you're going to be fishing from a very small pool of about 15% of technologists who are totally okay with coming to the office every day. And so if you think about that, this is a concept that's going to be here to stay for a very, very long time. So what do we do about that? Because we can say hybrid work is the future, but I can also tell you that this has actually generated a significant amount of mess over the past couple of years, right? People have sort of dived straight into it. We were somewhat fortunate because we've been doing hybrid work for 14 years since our founding in 2008, thanks to our great founders who set up the system that way. But many companies were not prepared for this, and even though we've all made the transition, the amount of knowledge silos and the noise with people reaching out to each other to ask questions, answering questions, repeat questions happening all over again when people are joining new companies, changing jobs within companies. So 50% of developers are encountering knowledge silos within their organization. And this is a huge suck on productivity and people's sort of impressions about working in their organization. And in sort of a worse situation, of course, this is obviously flow state. Again, the topic of context switching is really, really apparent, especially in a distributed work environment in the hybrid world. So all of these are issues, and we also sort of learned that people really, we did a little bit more research and said developers really are turned off when they are asked to work very specific working hours, given the 3 a.m. debugging point that I mentioned earlier. Or developers really find it unappealing if you're going to be forcing them to come into the office every day, right? Or they really want to make sure that they have opportunities to learn, like I've talked about. And more importantly, they want to be able to learn from developers outside of their team. They don't want to just sort of be focused on the 10 people on their own sort of Scrum team. They want to be able to say, I want to be able to work with Division X, while I'm in Division Y, but the SRE there knows a lot more about, what I care about than my own team does, as an example, right? So really unlocking sort of the ability for people to learn from each other is super important. And ultimately, this statistic is sort of core because 53% of developers want to work for companies that prioritize the developer experience. And what is the experience of a person, obviously even through the interview process, but after you come through the interview process, how do you actually experience the company? Are you productive? Are you feeling like you're getting opportunities to learn? Are you feeling like you're actually in a flexible environment? All those things sort of make a difference. So, and why is that important, developer experience? Because as we know, every company is a tech company. Tech is the future, especially the way the world is set up today. And of course, developers and technologists are powering this technology behind the scenes. They're building these next generation of applications, right? All of us are. And then, so we really need to make sure that these developers and technologists have got an empowered, they've got the tools to do their job, they're empowered to do their job with an amazing experience within your companies. That's how the funnel works. If we don't do that, we're not going to be able to accomplish the grand goals that we've set out. So that's the question I think we all have to ask ourselves. You have to ask yourselves, are you empowering your team with all the right things to make sure that ultimately these challenges of hiring and retention and reskilling and making sure they're onboarded well, et cetera, the fact that you're trying to drive these large transformations on all these sort of important topics, and really making sure that you're able to efficiently manage these folks in a distributed work environment, you're able to do that with developer experience at the heart of it, with flexibility, learning, and productivity at the core. All right, so I'm also happy to say, sort of moving to the last part of this around Stack Overflow, is that the keys to succeeding on these topics are sitting within your organization. And so I'd love to share, we at Stack Overflow, how are we helping customers? What are we doing to sort of help you given all these challenges that we just described? So I'll start with our vision. Our vision is to be the most valuable destination for not only the current, but the next generation of technologists. And everything that we do is in the spirit of achieving this over the next 5 years, at least, beyond. And of course, we think about this in a very long time horizon. But this is, everything we're doing is focused on this one subject. And if you know, of course, many of you know Stack Overflow, but I wanted to make sure that we sort of just give you a little bit of context on the scale at which we operate, who are we as a company, and so on. But just our public community, we've been around for 14 years. We are now the world's largest technology community in the world. We have close to 100 million monthly visitors. That makes us one of the most popular websites in the world, top 200 based on SimilarWeb, top 50 based on Alexa before it went away. And the questions asked every 14 seconds on Stack Overflow, which is dramatic if you think about the amount of network effects that generates. And we have close to 50 million questions and answers on every possible technology topic. And developers around the world logging into Stack Overflow. 81% of the world's developers log in every week. So we're sort of one of those things that Cal was mentioning during his introduction, that if Stack Overflow went down, I think we would sort of, we would have sort of a fairly, sort of unproductive world. So that puts a lot of pressure on our technology and product teams to make sure that we keep things up and running. And then finally, the content on Stack Overflow has been accessed collectively. And this is important because we think about knowledge reuse, and Teresa Dietrich, our product leader, will come and talk about this later this afternoon. It's like knowledge reuse is one of our fundamental metrics. And it is phenomenal to see that on our public Stack Overflow, all that knowledge has been reused 50 billion times. So just think about that statistic for a second. 50 billion times since 2014. So imagine translating that to your companies, inside your companies, where you can reuse knowledge at scale, and it sort of has this compounding effect. And that's, I think, really, really exciting. Our community is absolutely global. We have close to 239 countries represented. Many of them are on the Zoom call today, or on our live stream. I should say, and that is it's just so gratifying that we're making a difference for people literally all around the world. Literally every continent is represented, including, I might add, Antarctica, because we're also making our Stack Overflow resources available through our partnership with Kiwix to organizations like IceCube, where they are literally scientists in Antarctica leveraging Stack Overflow for their organization to be able to collaborate and share knowledge. We've partnered with organizations like BPI and Code 4000 that are for incarcerated individuals, both in the US, in New York, as well as in the UK, to make sure that they're productive members of society and who really have an interest in learning how to code. So this is really, really, it gives us a lot of, I would say, we're sort of very grateful to be part of this in the world. I think it's just amazing that we're able to sort of create that sort of impact. And we're not stopping there, because of the next generation that I explained, we want to empower the next generation of technologists. And so we have just kicked off what we call the Stack Overflow Student Ambassador Program, where we're really working with close to 200 universities to make sure that they have our resources to be sort of really great students as they come out into the workforce, as I was describing earlier. So we've kicked that off. We're also really sort of drinking our own champagne, so to speak, which is we really make sure that we live this hybrid world, work sort of set of principles. And so we bring people together, our entire company together once a year. We obviously live a lot of this sort of the principles around online and how do we actually manage that effectively. And then ultimately, we're also really focused on making sure Stack Overflow is really an inclusive place for developers. And so we've seen, we've done a ton of research on this topic. We'll be making some announcements around safe places for people to ask questions, as an example, through our staging ground feature, and a whole range of other things that we'll talk about today. But really, really exciting that we're really focused on making Stack Overflow a really inclusive place. And I often get the question, most people know Stack Overflow in the context of what I just described, which is the public platform, the impact that we have. a lot of people ask, hey, how does Stack Overflow make money, or how does it sort of sustain itself? What is its sort of business model? So I just want to make sure that for folks that are actually listening to that, to this topic, it's very clear to them, how we actually sustain as a company over the next, hopefully, many decades. And so the first product category that we focus on is something called reach and relevance, which is all around connecting developers and technologists to companies that are in the room, and through multiple mechanisms, right? We help companies create their sub-communities on Stack Overflow. Through our Collectives product, we are enabling companies to promote their product launches and their, anything that's sort of important to them through a whole range of products. So all of that, which I'll explain here in a second, is our first product line. The second product line is effectively a private version of Stack Overflow for companies to use within their organizations. And many of you are customers of ours in this space. And that is effectively to break down silos, promote knowledge sharing in a collaborative fashion, and really allowing you to accelerate within your organization towards your technology goals. So those are, our public community is the first part of our company, and then we have two product lines, Reach and Relevance and Stack Overflow for Teams. So let me just spend a minute on Reach and Relevance, and then I'll talk about Stack Overflow for Teams. So on Reach and Relevance, there are three components to it. Number one is what I mentioned around sub-communities within Stack Overflow. So we are able to help companies like Intel, that's a customer of ours, along with Twilio and Google Cloud and others, and more announcements here to be made here in the next few days, very exciting announcements about other very large tech companies that are going to be building their sub-communities on Stack Overflow through this concept. And what this allows companies to do is to get very close to engage with their core user base on Stack Overflow, for them to be able to endorse answers, for them to recognize members that are sort of power users in the community, make announcements about new products, get feedback on that, and really, so we've got a whole range of exciting things to really increase the engagement within this sort of sub-community. So that's Collectives. The second part of what we do is called Stack Overflow Advertising, which allows companies to leverage our banner ads or native advertising, which is direct to developers, to make sure that our developers and our users are not distracted by the way in which ads are presented, but also a whole bunch of sponsored content, our blogs and podcasts, et cetera, that go out to millions of people. So that's Stack Overflow Advertising. And then finally, what we call Stack Overflow Talent or employer branding, where companies have the ability to promote themselves as great employers on Stack Overflow, so you can then, in the flow of developers being on Stack Overflow, appeal to them if they would like to sort of apply to jobs at your company. So a really, really robust set of offerings, also to focus on advertising, generally speaking, and we really believe that you can take advantage of these. And then on the flip side, with Stack Overflow for Teams, it is, of course, the private version of Stack Overflow that's used by a lot of customers, and that really allows you to attract, onboard, and retain your top talent, help them reskill, learn from each other, et cetera, boost team productivity and collaboration by knocking down silos across your organizations, and really recognizing subject matter experts within the company, and really accelerating innovation by unlocking the capacity within your organizations to go faster as a result of learning and really, again, reskilling as an individual by learning from each other. So now, given sort of the universe that we all live in, the tech stack that I mentioned earlier as being so important to productivity, we all are very familiar with the first row of tools. I'm sure many of you are using some combination of cloud technologies and CI/CD and project management tools and real-time collaboration tools. But this whole space of knowledge sharing and internal communities has really not been solved for a very long time until we sort of showed up. And so the existing, the prior sort of tools were, internally built wikis and documents flying around, and especially given what I mentioned earlier around distributed work environments, where we've created a mess where people really need to be effective to be able to get the right information at the right time to do their jobs really effectively. There's an absolute role for companies like ours to sort of play to make sure that we're solving that problem for you. And we've been doing this since 2018, and we've got now close to 15,000 organizations on Stack Overflow for Teams, the private version of Stack Overflow. You can see the quality of the companies here. We started with Microsoft, who have close to 100,000 members of their organization that are part of Stack Overflow for Teams. Many corporate and investment banks and insurance companies that are not listed here, which we can't do that because of privacy reasons. but they're all customers of ours, 50, 60,000 users each. We've got a whole range of technology companies, leading technology companies, both in the US as well as in international locations that are customers of ours, and tens of thousands of seats. And so really we've been operating at an enterprise grade now for many, many years, and it's sort of only accelerating because it's that right time and right place for companies to be able to take advantage of this capability. And our users and our customers have also recognized us. So just announced in the past couple of days, G2, which is a customer-based review system, which is your users like you or customers like you, have gone and actually voted for a record 9 different categories. Every possible segment has been represented, and Stack Overflow's won awards in this space. And every possible geography has also been represented, which is like really, really exciting for us. In addition, very recently, Gartner recognized us as a real contender in the communities of practice area when you think about DevOps and agility. So Gartner is this is not a category that sort of existed, and so we're almost in the process of building this category because we've realized this is a big issue, and Gartner has recognized us very recently. And then finally, we've received a whole range of product awards over the past couple of years, which I won't go through in detail, but really all speaking to the efficiency that it's driving within companies. So it's really exciting to see that. And if I think about customers and what we're actually hearing from them, it's exciting to see companies like Dropbox that are really being able to leverage our capability to unlock who the subject matter experts are within their organization to generate a lot of knowledge reuse. We're able to see companies like Progressive. This is a chart, by the way, that they developed that shows cross-collaboration within their organization through Stack Overflow for Teams. That shows you that the questions that they're asking within a particular team, 67% of those were being answered by people outside their teams. So this gives you that power of unlocking people's knowledge collectively, which I think is really, really powerful. And companies like Kroger, which is one of the big retailers in the United States, and they are really being able to generate a significant amount of knowledge reuse within their companies to drive efficiency and productivity for their developers and technologists. 7,000 times knowledge was reused through Stack Overflow for Teams in just 1 year within Kroger. So, and then of course, if you think about our other analysts, other than Gartner, Forrester has recognized that folks leveraging Stack Overflow for Teams see close to 191% ROI by leveraging the capability. A company that's leveraging about 10,000, if they have a size of about 10,000 folks on our platform, see a benefit of about $9 million in 1 year. And then ultimately, what it does is it's driving interruptions way down to about 65 to 85% below what it was previously, which is a tremendous amount of unlocking. So, in conclusion, breaking down barriers really unlocks the flow state, which is exciting. And we really have, I think, a collective responsibility to empower the world to learn, share, and grow. So with that, I will conclude, and I think if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them. Yeah. I know we went over time.
Thank you. Thank you. I know one of the questions that we got are, will these slides be available? There's some helpful data in there. So I think
Absolutely.
We'll do a little recap and share some of those slides if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first question from our community is, you shared a stat about this. Isn't learning one new technology a year too fast, given the amount of time that it takes for something to sink in?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, right? Which is why I think continuous learning is super important. If you're all big readers, Malcolm Gladwell has talked about you need sort of 10,000 hours worth of practice to be really excellent at something, right? So I think in that context, he's absolutely right. Akash, you're absolutely right. But that's I think the interesting thing about technology is that there's always sort of this sense of abstraction that's going on, right? Every year, we started with assembly code back in the day, and then we slowly built up various abstractions to sort of make life easier for us. And I think over time, things have gotten easier. So it's not like we're learning something brand new. I think we're generally sort of building on the concepts of the prior sort of generation of what we've been sort of working on. So luckily, I think for us, it's not sort of a start from scratch situation. So that should give us some velocity to learn.
Sure. And then another question is, on the slide where you showed where we have the community and the paid products, that's a lot. What are you most excited about as you go into the next year?
Yeah, I think we really want to make sure that our vision is truly realized, right? So we really want to make sure that we're empowering a sense of community, both on our public platform as well as within companies. So I'm really sort of excited about making sure we do that at a very large scale. And the fact that we're coming together in our first inaugural conference like this is to enable the community to learn from each other and for us to be sort of a force multiplier for folks well beyond what we've been doing historically for the past 14 years.
Sure. And then a question about the data you shared. So how many developers participated in that survey? And over the many years that you've conducted it, what have you seen change in the data?
Yeah, I think, I think this year, especially, I think we saw something like 90,000 responses. It was sent to obviously a larger number, but 90,000 folks responded to our surveys. We do a whole range of now pulse surveys beyond our Stack Overflow annual developer survey that goes out to that group. So that's another several thousands of folks. So call it in the range of about 90 to 100,000 people every year respond to us. And so that's, again, a very meaningful sample of folks that we believe that we should trust this data because it's coming from our community, right? And the second question that you asked.
How have you seen the data change over the years?
Oh, right. Yeah, I think it's, I think in general, it's been very interesting to see, especially over the past few years, people's sort of affinity to gravitate towards, what makes them really efficient in a hybrid work environment versus not. That was really not a focus for many years. So we've really broadened, especially through feedback from the community, saying they really are, I think they're generally all set in terms of accessing, and we've got a system in place with Stack Overflow where new languages are talked about, questions are asked, and that sort of sets off on a flywheel. What they really wanted help on, and that's where we've started focusing our surveys on, is how do they live as humans? How do they sustain their lives that are becoming so demanding these days, given all the macro forces I just described? And for them, it's all about sustainability. How do they do their best? How do they bring their best versions of themselves to work? Yeah.
Great. The perfect question for a customer conference. My company uses Stack Overflow for Teams and it's going well.
Good.
However, some developers have fallen back on some old habits like asking questions in Slack.
Yeah.
Any advice to those to encourage them to post on Stack Overflow for Teams more?
Yeah, great question. I would say, the good news is that we should immediately make sure that you're able to take advantage of our Slack integration, because all the tools that I mentioned earlier on, Stack Overflow for Teams works with Slack, with Microsoft Teams, with GitHub, with Jira. And the idea, again, in the context of flow state, is to make sure that you're really not distracted and having to sort of context switch to go to Stack Overflow. You can do all of it just within your sort of system of engagement, so to speak, which is Slack or Microsoft Teams. And so we've created sort of this bi-directional integration, which allows you to unfurl content within Slack, and you should be able to sort of generate all that interest back in the same place. So I think all roads should lead to us being the source of knowledge. How you access that knowledge can be in the way you do, you go about your regular day.
Got it.
Yeah.
And then you shared a little bit about what it's like to work at Stack Overflow. I see that Stack Overflow is hiring. Why should someone want to work there?
Oh, well, I mean, yeah, we are absolutely hiring. So folks that are interested in working for Stack Overflow, please reach out to us because we're growing very rapidly over the next year. We've added close to, I think, 200 people just in the past 9 months within our company, all over the world. But yeah, I think you should work for Stack Overflow because I'll tell you why I joined the company as a CEO in 2019. The first reason is the impact that we're able to generate for folks like you in the room, right? 100 million monthly visitors, the fact that we can create a positive impact, it's probably literally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make that sort of a difference, a positive difference for people, where we're setting up sort of this next generation for such great success. And of course, that's our mission and what we care about. And I would say within our company, we're just getting started. We're reimagining what is possible to how we can actually help our customers. So it's a very exciting time to build within our company with our great product and engineering teams, really sort of digging deep into customer problems and really expanding on what we've been doing over the past decade to really sort of add value. And thirdly, I would just say it's an amazing organization with what we call stackers. And they really make the place in terms of living our core values, which are published on our website. And if those core values appeal to you, everybody that joins this company, there's a real sort of sense that we want to take care of stackers so that ultimately they take care of the community and ultimately our customers. And so we really believe, I fundamentally believe in that principle. I write about it all the time to our company every Friday in my weekly emails. So that's why you should come work for us. Yeah.
Great. I'm hiring too, marketing. How would you introduce Stack Overflow to new developers who may be intimidated by it or have not even heard of the platform before?
Yeah, so I think Stack Overflow is the world's largest knowledge base of technology information, everything from cloud technologies like AWS, Azure, Google, to programming languages like Python, to scripting languages like JavaScript. Any of those concepts and the content and the context of those sort of issues that you're facing on those topics exist on Stack Overflow to the order of about 50 million questions and answers. So we really believe that you learn best when you're sort of stuck, and we're helping people get unstuck. So if you're learning how to code, do any of those things I just mentioned, and you have an issue, it's very likely that you go to Stack Overflow, maybe through Google or directly on our website, and you find out, how do I do this on AWS Lambda or whatever else you've got on your mind? And the answer is always, thanks to, again, our very benevolent community, is going to be highly rated, and it's going to be the first response likely in your search results, and you're going to click on that, and you're going to be able to solve your problem immediately. Versus what many of us were doing a couple of decades ago, which was scratching our heads at 3 in the morning, trying to figure out, oh my goodness, it was all about just a close parentheses that was missing from my piece of code, right? So that is not going to happen now, and you're really sort of building with accelerated sort of speed.
Got it, thanks. And then I think this is a question about the Forrester report that you shared. So how do you quantify time saved on duplicate questions in private companies?
Yeah, so I mean, the capability is similar to the way we help with knowledge reuse on the public platform. With Stack Overflow for Teams, organizations are able to leverage the questions and answers and the long-form articles and collections of information that are within their company through Stack Overflow for Teams. All that content is being built up on our platform, like Microsoft with 100,000 users, and all that information is being reused by when somebody asks a question, how do I do this on AWS Lambda? The answer could be written by somebody, a fellow colleague, but in 3 months from now, that question could be asked again, and somebody doesn't need to respond to that because that answer has already been provided 3 months ago, and it's stored within Stack Overflow for Teams. And that answer just could come straight from Slack or from Microsoft Teams that's integrated into your Stack Overflow for Teams instance. So by reusing the historical information, subject matter experts are not having to be sort of distracted every time somebody has the exact same question that has been answered over and over again, has historically been answered already. So,
do you, as the CEO, use Stack Overflow or Stack Exchange?
The public platform, not so much, only because it's been a while since I've actually written a lot of code. Right, but in the private Stack Overflow for Teams, absolutely. Within our company, I just sort of share a quick anecdote. So absolutely, we use it all over our company. All our developers use it. Our technologists, which include DevOps folks, site reliability engineers, security folks, all of the folks in that category. And the third category of folks called knowledge workers, which include finance folks, our people team, our legal team, and marketers, et cetera. Are also using Stack Overflow, our sales folks. And every Friday, I send a note to the company showcasing the top 10 contributors to Stack Overflow for Teams within our company. And what's been very interesting to see is that most recently we've seen most of the amount of most contributions come from our knowledge worker category. The sales folks in our company are asking, hey, what is the latest version of our it could be some feature that we launched very recently, and how do we do this because our customer is asking for it? And that question is being asked by knowledge workers, which is giving you a sense of how the unlock happens across our organization. So anyway, broader answer, but I use our internal Stack Overflow for Teams a lot more as we sort of make sure that people are collaborating within our company.
Yeah, at risk of speaking for you, you have, though, asked a couple of biking questions on the Stack Exchange, right?
I have asked biking questions, that's true.
Great. How do you see Stack Overflow supporting underserved or underrepresented communities?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned this on a couple of dimensions, right? So this is a very important topic for us to make sure our community is highly inclusive and welcoming for folks from all backgrounds. And so, of course, I gave you the examples of what we're doing, even in in the incarcerated individuals category, or scientists in sort of geographies that we just don't have access to. But the younger generation, folks that are coming on with on-ramping through things like low-code or no-code tools, are then able to now start learning through Stack Overflow, and Teresa from our product team will explain this later, which is we're building things like a staging ground, which is a capability that allows new developers and technologists to not feel intimidated by our very objective Stack Overflow, which is, there's a cost to being objective, right? Because there's right and there's wrong. This is not a social media site. This is not a sort of a subjective discussion or a forum. This is a knowledge base of accurate information. And so with that comes the judgment of something being right or something being wrong. And so that can be a little bit harsh. My first question when I asked on Stack Overflow, I felt like I got slapped on the wrist, and I'm like, my God, this is quite a jarring experience. But once you understand the spirit in which it was actually set up and the brilliance of sort of the ingredients, it makes sense. So we are launching things like Staging Ground to give a safe place for people to ask questions, get used to it in sort of a shallow water, so to speak, before jumping into the deep end of the pool. We're also doing things like, we've sent something called the Unfriendly Robot, which goes and makes sure that it skims the content across Stack Overflow for any sort of untoward sort of comments or something that's sort of borderline rude. And that sort of it flags that to our company so our community team can manage those. So we've got a whole range of initiatives focused on this subject.
And how do you see tools like GitHub Copilot impacting the developer shortage?
Developer what, sorry?
Shortage.
Yes, yeah. I think it's, with these automated code generation tools, AI-generated tools like Copilot, and there's a whole host of other ones that, are coming online. I am actually a big fan of them in terms of bringing people, sort of getting people interested into writing code, because we need that, right? Given what I just described about the supply-demand imbalance, the fact that there's so much work to do but not enough people, right? Or the people are not skilled enough to do the work or don't have the right learning capabilities. So it brings on line folks like that in that $2 billion number that I mentioned, and that's great as an on-ramp. However, I do believe that automatic code generation tools have a limit, right? Because you really need to learn the fundamental principles of what you're writing. Because if you just rely on an automatic tool to generate code based on, say, sort of natural language, at some point, if you're asked to debug that thing, you're going to be in really, really deep trouble, or you just don't know what you're building. So it's kind of like you're building this thing that seems to be working, but you're going to hit a limit. So I think we really believe that fundamentally, and we're exploring several things on the subject to make sure that we're useful in this sort of broader space, which we'll talk about in the future. But we want to make sure people are learning as they are building code. But I think it's a great mechanism to get people interested as an on-ramp.
Great, thanks. The next question is about tech leaders. So how can tech leaders use Stack Overflow to be better equipped to handle the challenges you've mentioned, like hiring and flexibility? Do you have a community for leaders?
Great. I mean, this is sort of the purpose of Flow State, right? To sort of connect with leaders. This is our inaugural one. The first year, we hope to do this for many, many years in the future. But also, we conduct many other forums for tech leaders throughout the year in various parts of the country. Whether that's in the East Coast or West Coast, et cetera. So we're happy to sort of, share those with you so we can work with you and sort of, share what we've learned and for you folks to learn from each other.
Another question is, how do you think about the balance between asynchronous and synchronous work? So obviously people are learning online, but that's not mutually exclusive with collaborating in person or live on video chat.
Yes, yeah, so I think it's, this is one of our fundamental learnings, and I didn't describe it when I was talking, but especially with collaboration, we believe the world is split that way. There's asynchronous tools and there's synchronous tools. And, synchronous tools we've all gotten used to, which is, this is a synchronous, exchange, or a Zoom call is a synchronous exchange, or a Slack or Microsoft Teams exchange is a synchronous exchange. And that only, again, there's a limit to that, because if you have teams all around the world working in all sorts of time zones, and you're just busy sort of, texting people and just sort of, asking questions randomly at all hours of the day, there's a lot of distraction and context switching that happens, and that just is not, does not work for technologists. It's massively distracting. So there's a place where I think companies need to define what actually should be asynchronous, what should be asked in a Stack Overflow for Teams question, as an example, versus just sending a Slack message on a topic, right? Where do you use that? When do you sort of do it? So companies are very much creating principles around how do you actually operate as companies. And by the way, we're all learning together. Everybody has a very hectic meeting culture. It's still not uncommon for folks to be on Zoom calls for 8 hours to 12 hours a day, and then begin to sort of respond to all the things that sort of have been piling up throughout the day. So that whole system, and we're going to talk about that throughout the day, I'm sure, is something that we really believe needs to be sorted.
Thanks. This is a long one. Some companies may opt to use the public version of Stack Overflow for their work. This introduces security vulnerabilities, IP considerations. And companies may disregard these concerns and developers may be frustrated, but ask their questions publicly anyways. How do you approach solving this? Do you measure the risk or harm of people using the public platform for work?
So how do we approach, sorry, let's say the last part
I think
again?
encouraging people not to ask questions about proprietary tech on the public platform.
Yeah, so I think that's why Stack Overflow for Teams sort of showed up, right? Because in 2018, companies like Microsoft came to us and said, hey, we love Stack Overflow and our ability to use it on the public platform, but we'd love to have that capability inside our organization because 60–70% of what we want to share is proprietary in nature, and we'd rather not have our employees posting on the public Stack Overflow. So that's really how Stack Overflow for Teams, our SaaS product, was built, and that's now we have 15,000 organizations leveraging it for exactly that purpose. And organizations have done a whole range of things, where they're sending everything back to Stack Overflow as a single source of truth, including, by the way, things like proxy redirects, where people go to Stack Overflow on the public website, even if you're a Stack Overflow for Teams customer, and the answer is going to come back. The proxy redirect is going to send all the traffic back to Stack Overflow for Teams, so that again, through our unified search feature, you're getting the best of everything in our public community, and you're getting everything specific to your organization, both public and private in a single view, and that's something that we call unified search. So that's, most of our companies are leveraging that capability.
Great. One more question from the audience, and then just a quick one to close. You mentioned Stack Overflow being a repository of accurate information. What efforts do you employ to purge outdated or inaccurate information?
Yeah, great question. I think so on a couple of different dimensions. We're experimenting both in the public community as well as within Stack Overflow for Teams. So I'll mention something on Stack Overflow for Teams really quickly. On that, we have something called content health, along with this notion of knowledge reuse, where we're making sure that it's almost like we're deploying sort of a self-driving car within companies with our Stack Overflow for Teams capability, because it's going and then saying, could be, Susan, you answered this question, 3 months ago. It seems to be sort of outdated. Can you update this? Because we want to make sure this is fresh. So content freshness is super important for us to make sure that information is not outdated. Or it could nudge people to say, Jim, you're the expert on Azure DevOps, and your colleague around the world has asked this question. Could you answer this question because you're the subject matter expert? So all of that is happening on Stack Overflow for Teams. It's almost like it's very product-led in its approach, along with what we do with our customer success teams to enable you for success. On the public platform, there's an entire sort of effort going on, which is called outdated answers. And so we launched that a few months ago, and welcome to sort of check out our meta post on that subject. But it's all focused on making sure that we really target answers across our entire knowledge base to make sure if there's a newer, better way of doing things that's in fact reflected. And those answers are getting to show up first versus sort of the oldest answer that's been voted up over many, many years. So that is actually live in our public community. You can see that today, where we actually switched the preference. And by the way, users have the option to switch it that way, to look at the latest answers versus the historically most sort of voted answer, as an example.
Right. And then last question, an easy one. What are you most excited about for today?
Oh, I mean, this is just meeting with all of you and hopefully seeing all of you smile at the end of the day that it was actually a productive use of your time. So that's what I'm excited about.
Good, we love that. All right, well, thank you Prashanth for your talk and your time. We, because this is a developer conference, have built in lots of coffee breaks. So we are going to our first 15-minute break now.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.